my name's Hannah, and I'm going to be discussing the cognitive revolution. So, what is the cognitive revolution? The cognitive revolution was a shift away from behavioral psychology. It began in the early 1950s and went over into the 1960s. It wasn't necessarily a revolution, as it was more testing ways to disprove behavioral psychologist theories. It brought attention to processing skills such as language acquisition, memory, problem solving, and learning, and it focused on the internal mental processes behind human behavior. Noam Chomsky is an American linguist who obtained his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He believed that behaviorism could not be built upon, but only replaced. His theory was that language alone is a human species-specific trait, not just the ability to think. Behavioral psychologists later tried to prove Chomsky wrong by teaching apes language via sign, computers, or plastic tokens. They found that apes cannot remotely communicate as effectively as humans can. George Miller got his PhD in experimental psychology from Harvard University. He later wrote The Magical Number 7, plus or minus 2, Some Limits on Our Capacity for Information Processing. It brought attention to limitations on human attention and memory and set the stage for the first massive wave of research in information processing technology, which concentrated on attention and short-term memory. He adopted a more disciplinary approach to experimental psychology than behaviorism previously allowed him to. Later on, he ran the first experiments testing his colleague Noam Chomsky's theory as a processing model of human language, and the first experiments establishing that syntactic and semantic constraints could guide the perception of speech at Harvard University. Another influential person in the cognitive revolution was Jerome Bruner. He obtained his PhD from Harvard University and studied how personality dynamics shape people's perception of the world and how to solve complex problems. He co-founded the Center for Cognitive Studies at Harvard University with co-worker George Miller. He then led the New Look in the study of perception to unify perceptions, personality, and social psychology. He found that perception is an active mental process involving both conscious and unconscious mental activities. Later on, Jerome Bruner became concerned with the New Look in perception. He then began studying higher mental processes. He wrote A Study of Thinking, which looked at how people form concepts and categorize new stimuli as members of different conceptual categories. He did this by doing the shape study, which was where participants were given a variety of different shapes in different sizes and colors and were asked to examine the shapes to try and figure out the concept of the experiment. They found that there was no connection between stimulus and response, and the most important development was that machines could perhaps think. Ulrich Neisser, also known as the father of cognitive psychology, obtained his PhD from Harvard University in experimental psychology. He believed that memory, perception, and other internal thought processes could be studied and measured. This work was aided by growing computing power. He wrote Cognitive Psychology and dismissed computer models of thinking as simplistic and not satisfactory. This is the Harvard Center for Cognitive Studies, which was founded in 1960 by George Miller and Jerome Bruner, and where most of the research regarding cognitive psychology took place. Cognitive science. Ever since the scientific revolution that took place between 1543 and 1687, psychologists were interested in the similarities between humans and machines. One major issue was that methodological behaviorists did not believe mind was a topic for science and studied behavior as if mind did not exist. The way of ideas brought a view of the mind that could only be reconciled with a thoroughly mechanistic conception of not only the body but thought itself. With that, there was an uprise of studies looking at purposive machines and the similarities they have to mind. Purposive machines. The Watt generator was one of the first goal-directed purposive machines. However, it did not provide feedback like humans can. One machine that provides feedback as well as being goal-directed and purposive was the thermostat. When set at a specific temperature, it either turns on or off to maintain that temperature, allowing for feedback. The last step toward cognitive science was to build a machine like the thermostat, but for it to have many different purposes. This led to the creation of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence. After the creation of purposive machines, the question that needed to be answered was, could machines be intelligent? A.M. Turing wrote Computing Machinery and Intelligence, which defined the field of artificial intelligence and established the program of cognitive science. For a machine to be intelligent, it needs to trick a person into thinking that it itself is another human. This became known as the Turing test and is still used to this day in the creation of artificial intelligence. They created this by reverse engineering the development by bringing people into their labs and manipulating the stimuli in order to measure their resulting behavior. In conclusion, there are many influential people that brought together many great ideas to create cognitive psychology. The understanding of the human mind has allowed us to develop new technology that we still use to this day.